the transition into a Bitcoin standard is going to be very chaotic. If it's too rapid, it's sort of a demonetization event. The old currency starts to become useless and everyone is scrambling to get into Bitcoin. And that can entail a lot of human suffering. So back in 2016, I think there was a demonetization event in India where they remove, I think, $5 and $10 rupee notes out of circulation. A lot of people died, actually. I think maybe a dozen or so people died from exposure or being unable to pay for medical procedures because the hospital didn't want to take the old currency, right? So these things can be very chaotic. So imagine that type of event, but not just for a 5 and 10 rupee note, but for all the money of a country. And without knowledge of how Bitcoin works, you can see the opportunity for scammers. Like, okay, the Japanese yen is worthless now. Give it to me and I'll give you Bcash. That could definitely happen. Or worse, right?
Samson Mow, the CEO of Jan3, the man working to Orange Pill Nation, states all the work you've done, Samson. Thank you so much. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be here.
It's a real pleasure. I want to kick this conversation off and go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I'm really curious, Samson. This is a philosophical question. What does happiness mean to you?
Well, that's an interesting way to kick off a Bitcoin podcast, and maybe it's related, right? Happiness is really just the ability to do the things that you want to do in life and find fulfillment in those things, I believe.
I absolutely agree. It's the capacity. Now, the next question is, are you happy in life?
I would say so. I like to work on Bitcoin, and I get to work on Bitcoin, and I find that it's a very rewarding work. And I have a great team with me at Gen3, building out Aqua as well. And I couldn't be in a better company and with better company.
So, no, I absolutely love it. And just talking about Aqua in a second, it's my go-to hot wallet. It is so good. It is really, really good. I had George Bowden on the show yesterday. He absolutely loves it as well. We went down a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's pretty interesting. Like most Bitcoin wallets are Bitcoin and Lightning, but this is using Liquid. Like, why do you go down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, so having Liquid, I think, it gives us a big advantage, and it allows us to have native Tether issuance. I don't know if you saw the news today, but Strike now is supporting Tether, but they're using Tron. We're using Liquid as the base. So Liquid is a Bitcoin sidechain for those of you that may not know, but it is basically a layer of Bitcoin. We call it layer 2 just simply because it's really commonly established that Lightning is layer 2. So we just say these are layer 2s, and we kind of use Liquid as the interactive layer for everything. And that can be to support Lightning. So we do swaps with bolts into Lightning from Liquid. And I think you're aware that there are challenges to run a fully non-custodial Lightning wallet. You have to connect it to your node. You have to, or not, but you have to manage the channels, liquidity, or buy liquidity from someone else. And there are some other avenues to make it easier. And some of those solutions integrate eCash as the base. So you kind of use eCash as you're holding a Bitcoin, and you swap from that eCash into Lightning whenever you need to pay someone in Lightning. But I think there's some deficiencies with that. So typically eCash is one entity or one person running the eCash server, whereas Liquid is a federation of about 60, 70 members now, all running this network. And I believe uptime, robustness, and reliability are critical factors when you're building Bitcoin infrastructure. So that's kind of why we decided to go with Liquid as the base. So we kind of eliminate the complexity of Lightning interaction because you keep your Bitcoin in Liquid. It's sort of inert, and then you swap into Lightning when you need to pay somebody. So you kind of have the best of both worlds. You don't have to deal with the channel management because your Bitcoin is in a UTXO on Liquid, but you can interact with Lightning anytime you need to without that complexity. And some feedback that we've had is, you have to pay for every transaction, like a few cents, 3 cents to take money in and send out in Aqua because it's swapping to Liquid. But that I think is actually quite affordable if you're using it for real life daily activities such as paying for gas, shopping for groceries, paying for lunches and dinners and whatnot. Because you're typically paying, I don't know, maybe 10, 20, $100, and then you have a couple cents transaction fee. Whereas with the Lightning Wallet, if you're actually spending in those types of amounts, you probably need to top it up very frequently, either with the new on-chain transaction or with splicing or something. So it's kind of your choice is a la carte in Aqua, where you pay a couple cents a transaction, or it's like a monthly subscription fee where you top it up every month, and the on-chain fees could cost you 4, 5, 10, maybe $20 to do that, but then you spend it for free after. So what we find is like people like George are finding Aqua to be very good because paying a la carte is actually more effective and efficient in many ways versus a lump sum payment in advance.
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely love it. And to be honest, I haven't been looking for them, but I've not once noticed the fees. I don't know, they're just so small, it's really insignificant. I've got a question, and then I want to loop back. I sort of went off on a tangent here, Samson. My apologies. But they framed this question as kind of a weird one. If you could ask about the non-KYC aspect of Aqua and its potential misuse. I'm a big fan of Aqua, by the way, in brackets, but what is stopping a person sending full-fat Bitcoin to Aqua, converting it to Liquid, and back again, then sending back to the freezer? That's essentially erasing all wallet history, including purchase price, timing, etc. Obviously, that's not financial advice. It's a hypothetical question and answer, but what would you say?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And in theory, you can do the same thing with any other system. So I guess his question is really framing that you're putting Bitcoin into Liquid and then moving it back out of Liquid into main chain. And I think that's a good way to preserve privacy. But like the Liquid network and the peg system with Liquid is not meant to be a mixer, right? You could put in 10 Bitcoin and you might get the same 10 Bitcoin out again. There's no guarantee of that, right? So it is not a good way for you to, you know, move money in and eliminate all trail. But the other dimension too is you can really use anything. Like you could sell Bitcoin, God forbid, for let's say Ethereum, and then sell the Ethereum for
Fuck.
Bitcoin. And again, you would technically erase your history as well. But there's a deeper level here, which is you're kind of acknowledging the all the chain analysis companies are actually legitimate, which I don't believe they are, because every single Bitcoin transaction does result in new Bitcoin. You can apply a heuristic and say maybe it's related to the previous one, but there is actually no way to definitively prove that. So a lot of people think like, I make a transaction and it's traceable back through, but that is just a guess. And every Bitcoin transaction actually results in new Bitcoin unrelated to Bitcoin previously.
Really quickly, ladies and gentlemen, I've teamed up with the Bitcoin Way. This is the professional Bitcoin IT team. They can help you master your Bitcoin self-custody. Safetina Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, also recommends this professional Bitcoin IT cybersecurity team. Their guys are absolutely amazing. They can help you set up a node, protect your stack, get your Bitcoin off the exchange. Make sure that you are following best practices. Number one, that it's air gapped. If you don't know what that means, I've put their details below for you. If you're worried about SIM swaps, reach out to the Bitcoin Way. Maybe you just want to know that you are doing the best thing. You're doing all the little tricks within your device to be able to make sure nobody can ever get into your Bitcoin, have any access. If you've got any queries about connecting to public USB and charging points, connecting to rogue Wi-Fi access points or malware-infected USB cables and flash drives, reach out to the Bitcoin cybersecurity team, the Bitcoin Way. Free 30-minute call. They are at the top of the description. Yeah, that's a good way to be able to frame frame it, and maybe there is a use case for Ethereum after all. I'm playing it. So I won't dive into Vitalik. But Samson, like what I'm really interested in is who you are as a person. Like before Bitcoin, before Orange Pilling Nation States, flying around in private jets, having Adam Back, Michael Saylor on speed dial. Like what was your life like before then? What's your origin story? If you don't mind going into it.
Sure. My background is game development. So I first
Interesting.
started out doing games. I worked on a lot of real time strategy games, Company of Heroes, Dawn of War. And then later I was at Ubisoft and I worked on some Might and Magic franchises and a Smurf social game that got to be top 10 in social game rankings. We had about 10 million users with very rapid growth. This is like the heyday of social gaming. And then I'm actually still doing games. So I have a game company still called Pixelmatic, and we're working on a game called Infinite Fleet, which we're trying to build with digitized assets in the game. You can call them NFTs, but they're just digital assets. And that's still under development right now. But I'm still kind of in the gaming industry as I'm doing all the Bitcoin stuff at the same time.
So that's really interesting. And when you say digital assets, are they going to live just within the game, or are they going to live on Bitcoin or Liquid or Lightning, or where are they
Yeah,
going to live?
so right now we haven't minted the assets yet. They are just promised to be minted. And we were looking at doing it on Liquid previously, and I think we issued the game currency on Liquid, but there's no marketplace yet for players to trade them back and forth. So we're planning to actually revisit where we issue those assets, but maybe on Lightning. We'll see. But there is a benefit to sort of tokenizing things because it gives control back to the players. I'm sure there's many games that you played in the past where, well, maybe you haven't been banned, but you can be banned, and then you kind of lose all your stuff in addition to progress. And I think while most Bitcoiners are very hardcore and very focused on Bitcoin, you can't really deny that there is a market that people want, these items, digital items, and whether it's on a chain or not on a chain or just in a database of the game company, some of these things are valuable and people will pay a lot of money for them and they do want to keep them too. So I think there is a use case to try to figure out how to digitize these things and make them bearer assets that a player can actually keep themselves.
Yep. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. And I agree. Like, if you get bans, you want to be able to restart or be able to sell them and at least keep your progress, especially like the amount of money that goes into gaming and just buying skins or things like that's absolutely insane. Like it sort of brings up me the debate that was around ordinals, and I know very little. I don't have enough of an understanding to be able to lean one way or another. My personal belief is like the only issue that I have is when we're putting it on the main chain. It's not really an issue. However, when people go to run a node, they're going to have to get larger and larger hard drive storage devices to it, and we want nodes to be like as cheap as possible for the most amount of people. That's what helps keep Bitcoin decentralized. Do you think by like putting it on Liquid or Lightning, it can stop that from being an issue?
Yeah, so I would say ordinals are definitely some sort of spam, um, but there's no way to combat it because they are paying for the spam. I think Luke and some other people have tried to filter them, but at the end of the day, you can't really police that because then you get into the slippery slope of can we police transactions we don't like? And if they're paying for the block space, it is an economic transaction. So I don't think the right way to deal with it is not to do anything and let them run out of steam or run out of capital to do that. But I do think it's sort of a form of spam because it's not a financial transaction like a Bitcoin transaction. The distaste for it, I think, comes from how it's marketed. That it is something to do with Bitcoin when it's really just a pointer in the Bitcoin blockchain to something else external, like ordinal client database, right? The ordinals don't really live on Bitcoin. There's something there that is pointing somewhere else. So you can kind of reference a piece of data on Bitcoin, but the thing itself doesn't really live in the Bitcoin chain, right? Like if you run a Bitcoin node, there's no way for it to parse that and understand that, or even view it. You have to add another layer to view it. So I think it's probably better that these things go off onto other chains, either on over Lightning, but there's problems with Lightning because Lightning doesn't handle non-fungible things well. It's good for fungible assets like Bitcoin over Lightning or stablecoins over Lightning could be good. But I think Liquid is a good option. But the the hype and the marketing of ordinals is really that it's on Bitcoin. So you can't really dissociate that and have it still functioning. But I feel like that hype train has kind of gone and it's not a big deal anymore.
Yeah, yeah, it was crazy. Definitely last year, but it has gone pretty quiet, which is nice to be able to see. Just one more question, like tying in Aqua. Why did you choose to put Tether on it instead of just having Bitcoin? Why stablecoin?
Right. And I guess this ties into your earlier question, like why Liquid? So Liquid, again, has native Tether issuance. There's no need to bridge it into something else. So I think there's a few options to do stablecoins over Lightning, but there's no native issuance. So someone would need to bridge it to create it. But Tether already exists in Liquid, so we can take advantage of that and use that. There's probably more people using Tether than Bitcoin right now. So the way I look at it is there's an opportunity. Tether has expanded the market for digital assets, and we can use that expansion to drive more Bitcoin adoption by supporting Tether on Liquid. And we have interoperability too. So you can swap from Tron and Ethereum, and we're adding a few more into Liquid Tether and back out. So the reality is your Aqua Wallet is very pure. There's like a water purification filter that filters off the altcoin stuff from Tether, and you just have pure Liquid Tether in your Aqua Wallet. And same for sending out. You can send it out to these things, but you never need to have Tron Tether or Tron or any other altcoin stuff in your Aqua wallet. But the most important thing is really like there is demand for stablecoins in the world. For a lot of us that have bank accounts, like you and me, we kind of forget that there are people with no bank accounts, and they may never get a bank account because they don't have a fixed address, they don't have documentation and whatnot. So they're just using stablecoins as if it was their bank account. And I guess the hesitancy to embrace stablecoins or support them has cost Bitcoin some amount of adoption, I would say, because you have this market in the global south, in Latin America, and to Africa too, and other places that want stablecoins. But I believe we're the first Bitcoin wallet that is really supporting stablecoins like Tether. There have been some smaller attempts to support it, like what is it? Bitcoin Beach Wallet. The Bitcoin Beach Wallet had stable sats, right? And that's not really a common standard. So you might have some people using stable sats, but that's a very small ecosystem and it's sort of closed off from everything else. And that doesn't really support the need for people that are already seeking Tether. But now you're seeing more people coming to the realization that stablecoins are not a bad thing. So Jack Mallers just announced today that Strike is now supporting Tron Tether, and he went on to speak about the reasons why they're doing that. Firstly, their user base wanted it. The user base in, I think, Africa and other places, they said we want to buy Bitcoin with stablecoins. And then his rationale, which I've been saying for some time, is that technically, if stablecoins are bad and it's a shitcoin, then any service that lets you interact with the dollar itself, either through ACH or SEPA or euros through SEPA or whatever, you're also supporting shitcoins too. So what is the difference really between ACH, SEPA, and stablecoins? It's all just transport rails for dollar denominated value. And given that there is demand, we should support that. And we can drive those people to adopt Bitcoin. So for Aqua, one of the key things is we put at the very top of the app that Bitcoin is your savings account. But Tether is featured front and center. So you can use Tether and every day you'll see the Bitcoin price. you'll see Bitcoin as savings, and hopefully people will clue in and they'll use some of our swap functionality to swap a little bit of Tether into Bitcoin and get their feet wet and start being a Bitcoiner. But it's really just a philosophical perspective. We are willing to meet them where they are. And a lot of Bitcoin wallets choose not to and just say, you can only use Bitcoin. But I just don't believe that's reasonable to push on the world. It's good as a goal, but functionally, people are not looking for Bitcoin volatility and they may not understand Bitcoin, but they want dollars so they can save because their own currency is devaluing and going to zero.
Yeah, which is happening everywhere, faster in some places. And I think that's a good way to be able to approach it. Is Bitcoin volatility can get pretty wild, and I think it's going to get insanely volatile. You're talking about $100,000 in one day. Like here in Australia, Samson, we've had two God candles like in the last month to the upside, and 2 months ago we had a God candle to the downside. And
Yeah.
I think that's going to keep happening, and it's good when you understand. But if you don't, the dollar sure does look good in those moments.
Yeah. I think the key is to understand that there are people in the world that just want a digital dollar. There's a shortage of physical dollars, obviously, and there's a shortage of access to digital dollars via the banking system. So these people that seek out the digital dollar, they're going to use something. And we can either preach to them that you need to just use Bitcoin and take Lightning payments, or we can give them stablecoin access. And I think the way that we've structured it in Aqua is the best of both worlds because it is a Bitcoin wallet and layer 2, but we support Tether, but we're trying to ease you off of it and show you a better version of it that is on Liquid, which right now I think we have lower fees than everything else. Like sending a Tether transaction is like 2 cents and 2 to 5 cents versus Tron, which now is somewhere like $2. So I believe as people start using Aqua and they start to get a taste for Liquid USDT, they're going to want more.
Yeah, I was trying to pay for something in Bitcoin, and the guy said, "Yeah, that's all good. I'll accept Bitcoin for it." And I'm like, "Well, you need to download a wallet. You can start with one on your phone. You should download Aqua. You can get your seed words, which is good. Like that's really good that you can get your backup for it." And he's like, "Oh, I don't trust downloading an app on my phone." Like, what's your rebuttal to that? Because I've heard it so many times. Like, I was in the US last year and I made a little Bitcoin, like a mini documentary, and I just went round and I was giving people like $150 of Bitcoin at that stage. So anyone that said yes, and so many people would be like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And I'm like, "Well, you need to download an app," and they're like, no. I'm like, "Why not?" And they're like, "I don't want to have an app on my phone." How do you combat that?
Well, you can't really do much. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah,
If they're not willing to download an app, I mean, they're definitely not going to buy a hardware wallet, right? I
yeah.
mean, the barrier is much higher. So, I mean, I can't really think of a way around that. You just have to convince them that you'll download an app for, I don't know, random stuff. I mean, there's people downloading apps that do very stupid things. Like,
Yeah.
if you remember the early days of iPhone, people had an app for, I don't know, pushing a button to make a fart noise or something like that. And they're willing to download that, but you don't want to download a piece of Bitcoin software that would let you have your own money. So this is why I think we're just really early. People don't understand, and they're happy to not understand because the world they live in is comfy.
Well, they feel like it's comfy, but I actually have a feeling like the financial world's sort of melting down around them. And Samson, like I agree, we are early to Bitcoin, but people are going to see Bitcoin. It's at $100,000 today while we're filming, and they're going to feel like they're late. But you've got like a really interesting perspective on price action and where you think we're going. Can we dive into that a bit? Like, what do you see coming in the future? There's so much happening in the media, both good and bad.
Yeah, so you kind of hit one of them, which is God candles, $10,000 candles on the daily chart in one day. And the next step, I think, is the Omega candle, which is $100,000 candle on the daily. Hopefully green, but possibly red.
That's a good
Like,
caveat.
yeah, like we had a red Godzilla candle recently, right? It went down like 13,000. So it can go both ways. But the trend, I believe, is that we're going to see Bitcoin become much more turbulent in bigger swings up and down as we go towards $1 million per coin and beyond that, because this is sort of price discovery. And I happen to lean towards the side of green candles, because the way I look at the demand and supply imbalance is just so skewed that it makes me fearful that it's just going to come all at once, and we're going to see this Omega candle just rise up nonstop for a whole day as people pile on into Bitcoin. Because you can see, like, even though we're up here, we're not really moving that quickly yet, and the demand from ETFs and from MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor, it just seems ridiculously skewed. Like there is 20x, sometimes more demand just from ETFs in a given day. And that does not seem sustainable to me. And there are some theories that OGs are selling, but I really don't think that that's necessarily the case. It could just be people moving and migrating coins to new wallets, or to multi-sig, or improving security. So I just think there is a supply shock coming and nobody sees it coming. And one day there just won't be enough Bitcoin, and that will just trigger this recursive demand shock coupled with this supply shock that just shoots us straight up vertically.
And like realistically, like people here an Omega candle, and you've been going on about the Omega candle for a long time, Samson. Realistically, do you think it's going to happen soon within Bitcoin's history, say like in the next 1 to 2 years? Or do you think maybe the cycles continue, we get a blow off top, we come down, and then it's the next cycle where we...
It's already here.
Let's go.
Yeah. But the whole concept of cycles is interesting. I don't really believe in cycles. And before I get into it, I just want to say, like, there has been talk of a super cycle where Bitcoin just goes up and doesn't stop. I think it'll come. There will be fluctuations, there will be volatility, but it seems like the concept of cycles is not something that is in line with Bitcoin. We've had 3 cycles, I guess, that look similar. But the first cycle, like the first 4-year period of Bitcoin, the first epoch, I think you can't really count that. That's just early price discovery and formation of the Bitcoin price, right? It's very, very immature and very fragmented market. So you can say, like, there's been 3 coin tosses and they kind of look similar. But why would Bitcoin continue on mirroring 4-year periods ahead of it when adoption is exponential? I just don't see why that would be the case. So eventually the cycle, or what appears to be a cycle, should break to the upside. And I guess this is what Omega is about. It's just a breaking of the cycle. And I think an Omega candle would definitely break some of the models out there, like maybe stock to flow, and definitely, what's the other one?
Power law.
Power.
What are your thoughts about like those charts, that the power law and stock to flow? Do you think they're useful in any way?
They're useful as a guidance, but I think saying that Bitcoin is going to follow this exact model is very dangerous, because Bitcoin just does its own thing. Like it's not like people were thinking to, or there are people were being recommended to trade against the power law. Like when you get up here, sell everything, and then you buy back cheaper.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite dangerous, because
I agree.
you could never buy back again cheaper, right? There is no guarantee. And I think you just have to look at the writing on the wall, which is adoption seemingly is growing exponentially. Like the US, a world superpower, is mulling over creation of strategic Bitcoin reserves and significantly adopting Bitcoin in a major way. And I believe that's going to trigger a lot of follow on behavior from other countries too. Like there is discourse now in Russia to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve and other countries too. So it's really just a matter of time. And when the US does something, everyone's just going to pile on.
Yeah. Like, I want to dive into this a little bit more. Like the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, what's been proposed is basically, for anyone that doesn't know, over the next 5 years, starting from 2025, the US government will add 200,000 Bitcoin onto their balance sheet. They'll lock it up for 20 years, accumulating 1 million Bitcoin. Do you, number, I guess there's two questions here. Do you believe they're actually going to do it? And do you believe if you do think they're going to do it, that they're going to get to 1 million Bitcoin?
I think they will do it because they don't have a choice. With the debt, the US national debt the way it is now at $36.2 trillion, I don't see them paying that off. Um, it's just too big, and the interest rate to service that debt is just growing exponentially. And the question is, will spending stop, and can they taper it? And I just don't think they can stop spending. There's talk of a Department of Government Efficiency to kind of cut costs, but it's to be seen if that will work or not, because you're going to cut some costs there. You'll cut some jobs, government jobs, probably, but that is going to make a lot of people unhappy. And what that leads to is that they vote in the other guys next term, right? So there's a delicate balance here, and this is why I'm really bearish on the world being able to survive in a fiat standard, and they absolutely need to go to a Bitcoin standard, because any attempt to fix the current problems through cost cutting or austerity or anything is going to push people to the other side, because everyone wants free stuff. So the window of opportunity to actually fix something is very narrow, kind of like we're talking about before we started the podcast. When we at Jan3 try to engage with the government, we have like a 2-year window for any given administration to do something. The first year, they are not well prepared. They're still, building out everything and preparing and getting into place. Then you have the last 2 years, and then you have the next few years, and then you have the last year, where either they're on their way out and they don't want to do anything, or they are preparing for re-election and they don't want to take any risks. So even within a 4-year term of any government, there is only really half of it that is viable to push something forward. And it's the same thing like when you're trying to fix the country. Like, you have a very narrow window, because you're going to have to deal with the next election soon after. So I guess to answer your question, I believe they have to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, because the dollar is diminishing, and really the really only net buyer of treasuries is Tether, right? Stablecoin issuing. China is tapering, and the BRICS countries are probably going to taper and step away from the dollar as well. So then, if there's no demand, what are you going to do? You have to do something, because the US is just like is broke. Basically, they're massively in debt, and there's no one willing to buy the debt. So yeah, I think strategic Bitcoin reserve is definitely on the cards, and even possibly more, like Bitcoin as legal tender, Bitcoin used as money.
Yeah, that's incredible. And the reason why I'm so interested is because in Australia, we are fairly close with the US, with the Five Eyes network, and being a G9 country. And, if you guys sneeze, we catch a cold, as the saying goes. So I hope it happens so the conversation can change here where I live, because the media at the moment, mate, they absolutely hate it. They have not come out favorably over Bitcoin's history, and just so much gaslighting. But you're in the privileged position, lucky, maybe pressure is privilege. I'm sure it's not easy work orange pilling nation states. But since Trump came out and they started talking about the strategic reserve asset, is the conversation easier for you now when you go about and try and orange pill and these nation state central banks?
Yes and no. I would say theoretically it should be easier. But functionally, no. Like there is still resistance to this idea. We had a call with a few people from a central bank last night, and we kind of explained what we think is going on and what will happen. And the response was kind of like, yeah, we think we're fine, and we don't think the status quo is going anywhere. And I did point out in my spiel, my pitch, that the U.S. is looking to adopt Bitcoin as a strategic reserve and possibly do more things with it. And yeah, they kind of it just didn't seem to register, and they kind of acknowledge it. And I even asked, like the largest financial company on the planet, BlackRock, is running this ETF, and Bitcoin is the most successful ETF they've ever launched, and they have a massive holding of Bitcoin for their clientele. And they're like, yeah, we know, but it didn't seem to really register. It's like, I know the sky is blue, but what do you want me to do? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so strange, and I guess it's hard, when you've gone so far down the rabbit hole, like, and you've read all the books and you've been listening to people in the Bitcoin space and reading up and really studying this thing. But for someone that's running a central bank, and if you're explaining the problem and the solution, it doesn't make sense that they can't really see it. Do you believe it's maybe that they just don't want to see it, so they just won't engage their mind at all? And they just want, it's what whoever's closest to the money printer and the people talking, like, they've won the fiat game. They're on top of the world. They think that they're the king or queen of their universe, and they don't want anything to disrupt that. Do you think maybe that could come into it? It's a little bit of fear that everything they've worked for and they can control and manipulate other people's lives is going to be taken away?
Well, I don't want to speculate, but that's definitely a possibility. Why give up the power that you have, right? Nobody that has power like that should, in theory, want to give it up,
Yeah.
right? Unless they see the end in sight. And I believe it's difficult to do that, to see the end is in sight, because they're living in a very comfy world where they can control the money supply. I don't think they understand that there is a change that's about to happen, and it's coming very soon.
Yep. Talking about change, like, Nayib Bukele's done such amazing things with Bitcoin and has accumulated a huge amount, what he's done in that country. But there's something that came out the other day where he's asked the IMF for a loan, and they said, like, he needs to scale back a little bit with his Bitcoin dreams. You probably know a whole lot more than I do. That's all I know. Do you have any insight, or, like, what are your thoughts, even just personally, in regards to it?
Yeah, I saw the news come out. I think it was the FT, Financial Times, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't really clear what is happening, and I think we shouldn't be, guessing what President Bukele is doing. We should just wait and see what he says. But obviously there are reasons that he would want a loan. They do have a large amount of outstanding debt, and they do need to deal with it. So we'll see what he does. It could be that he's taking the loan to buy Bitcoin too, right? So there's
Yeah.
many different possibilities that are at play here.
It'd be crazy if he buys Bitcoin. But also, like, it happened a week after they announced that they've potentially got like $3 trillion in gold that they've just discovered. Maybe they used a loan to mine the gold to be able to buy the Bitcoin. Who knows? I guess we'll see. Talking about gold, Peter Schiff's having a meltdown on X lately with Michael Saylor and other proponents recommending that the US sells their gold and buys Bitcoin. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it is a brilliant idea. I tweeted about it last night that you know the total holdings of Bitcoin in the U.S. could be somewhere from 15 to 25%. Between the ETFs, between the corporations, between large holdings, between the holdings of the U.S. itself, and the Winklevoss twins, Tim Draper. There's a lot of Bitcoin in the U.S. So in one fell swoop, they could effectively make the U.S. a massive superpower in terms of Bitcoin if they demonetize gold. Um, because they're also the U.S. is the largest holder of gold. So if they nuke that in favor of Bitcoin, that changes the dynamic massively. And you have to look at it from the perspective of they have political adversaries that have a lot of gold, and this could deal a massive blow against those adversaries that have been stacking gold diligently for the last couple decades, who also are stepping away from the US dollar, I might
Yeah.
add.
It'd be interesting. I think tensions and global tensions would definitely increase if that was the case. But
But the right move is not necessarily the move that's going to happen. Like, I think you and I and Sailor can see, like, this is a strategic, brilliant stroke, but there's probably a few other things like diplomacy at play here. Like, they
yeah,
have to consider, but also to understand the move, you need to understand Bitcoin too. So we'll see what happens, but I would say it's likely to happen because it's such a brilliant tactical move.
yeah. When you say like likely to happen, do you think like it's likely to happen in a short period of time, or just like it's likely to happen at some stage?
Probably at some stage.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, let's focus first on getting strategic Bitcoin reserves built in the US and then other countries, and then we'll see about this next move. It's such a big, bold move that it's like all in, but the win is almost guaranteed. So that's why I think it has to happen eventually. But the question is when.
yeah. Hey, it's like when you're saying Omega candles come in and like I know Bitcoin's going to $1 million, then it's going to $10 million. But when? I've no idea. Nor do I care. Like
Yeah.
times on our side. We're both young Samson, and I guess that's the only thing I'm trying to be more and more mindful of. Is like, yes, like 100,000 was coming. Obviously, it's happened now, but when was it going to happen? I don't know. Like we know after the fact, and it's just to be able to buy, stack, and chill. Going to a different thread, like Bitcoin's changed my life in so many ways and sort of changed the way that I perceive the world because of the foundation and just based in truth and numbers. But for yourself, what's the most unexpected lesson you've learned from your journey, like through Bitcoin?
Hmm. That's a good one. I would say it's the ability for people to understand money. This is the biggest thing I've picked up on. And maybe it's intentional. Maybe this is why schools don't really teach you about where money comes from. It's just assumed that it's a thing that's always existed since the dawn of time, paper money. But there is no education about this. Maybe a little bit tangentially, like, coffee beans were used as money, but how money works and all these things, it's largely ignored. And I don't think people are very much prepared for the world. And maybe it's intentional again, but that's the biggest surprise I've had, that talking to people about money, either they don't care or they don't know or they don't want to know. And it just seems like such a shock that something so natural and such a big part of everyone's lives is something that they just don't care about. That's the biggest eye opener for me.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and I completely agree. For someone here's a good question, and I'm sorry, you've probably been asked it so many times, Samson. But to you, like, what is the definition of money, or just what is money?
Well, money is just human time and energy. Um, it's a way that you can store your time and energy for the future, so you can work harder, produce more goods, and your goods might be perishable, right? It could be fruits, or vegetables, but you can sell them for money and then store the money for the future. So I wouldn't say it's like a battery, but it's a way for you to store in this ledger. And I believe the ledger has to not be corruptible by anything, because that is how people end up stealing from other people, right? When you have central banks that can print money, they can effectively steal your time as a person by removing value from the instrument you stored your time and energy in, which is, for the most part, digitized or paper pieces of fiat. So that's the biggest thing. Money is really a way that you can motivate people to do something, right? Because it is valuable. It is stored value over time. And being able to print money just lets you manipulate and control the population.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Satoshi, that we have Bitcoin. Do you like you've looked at Bitcoin and especially like the underlying technology a lot closer than I have, and probably 99% of people watching this. Jeff Booth says, Bitcoin's going to succeed as long as it stays number one, decentralized, number two, secure. Are there any other types of threats that could stop, the greatest experiment of all time?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I had a podcast with the guys at Unchained, Dhruv and Joe, and we're talking about, was Bitcoin discovered or invented?
Yeah.
But somehow that conversation meandered over to what we're calling Bitcoin astrophysics now, and we're kind of theorizing what happens if other civilizations have a Bitcoin, right? And my thinking is that the biggest threat outside of ourselves and tinkering with Bitcoin and centralizing it is really aliens. Because if you have an alien civilization with more advanced technology, we really don't have anything to offer them. And if you think again of what I just said, that Bitcoin is stored time and energy, human time and energy, uh, we don't really want, like, we they don't really want our technology, right? Do they want a Tesla? Maybe to play with, in the way that we might have wanted a beaver pelt or a bead necklace when those things were money. But do they want a Tesla, or even what is it, Starship, as a technological thing that they can use functionally, practically? Probably not. They have more advanced technology. So basically, they would be rendering Bitcoin useless at that point, if and there was an alien civilization with their own version of Bitcoin, because we would want their Bitcoin because we want to buy things from them. We want their spaceships and their cars, or their flying cars, or their anti-gravity engines and whatnot.
Wow. That took such a turn. Do you believe aliens are real?
I would say the probability of aliens existing is far higher than them not existing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And we're spinning through this rock and time and space. To think that we're the only people doing that, and whatever exists outside, who knows? The only being doing that. I sort of brought it up before, and we talked at the start of the show. But like talking to nation states and central banks, at the start you said like it's pretty hard, but like I guess like what lessons have you learned through that process, like negotiation strategy, pinning them down within that 2-year period? Like like sort of what framework do you have that you've learned over the years to effectively do it more and more and more? Because you're pilling people on such a high level. Maybe there's some takeaways for people that like to orange pill their friends, their families, businesses out there.
Well, I think the biggest thing is you shouldn't have an expectation that you're going to succeed. And one of the things we say is we are just a resource. Gen3 is simply a resource. You can ask us questions, and if you want help with something or you have something that you need to bounce off of, we're here to answer your questions. I think people get turned off when you get really pushy and say you need Bitcoin, and then you try to drag them down the rabbit hole with you. And again, I'll repeat it: like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So we just try to be available. We try not to be pushy, and if they end up adopting Bitcoin, it's to their benefit. Really, it doesn't help us one way or another. So we just try to be there for them and answer questions. And if they have some ideas, we might have some ideas. We try to present the ideas. They might ask for, a more detailed plan, and we're happy to, put more effort into it and flesh it out a bit more. But it's really up to them to make the next step. And you can see like the benefit of adopting Bitcoin is just massive. And when you adopt Bitcoin really does matter. Uh, but it's hard to get them to reach that conclusion, I would say. But there's another interesting phenomenon, which is something we come across time and time again. So we ourselves don't always have all the contacts, and we rely on just Bitcoiners in different places making introductions and making connections. But the funniest thing is everyone that's tried to help us, the ones that have asked us for like a presentation or a deck, those have typically gone nowhere. And the people that have said, we'll make an introduction and we'll just do it, those are the ones that actually resulted in meetings. So it's an interesting phenomenon that we see.
Yep. So if people have friends, family, or that they've got connections, it's best just to like reach out to you and just create a connection, start that conversation, and then for you guys just to take over.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is connected to everyone else through 6 degrees of separation. So
Yeah.
if you want, you can probably find someone that can find the president or prime minister for you, and it's just a matter of effort. And I think one of the most beneficial things that we are doing as a company is just showing people that it can be done. We can actually get these meetings, and we can, make things happen. Whether or not they choose to take the information that we give to them is another issue, but getting the meeting is very much attainable in most countries.
And I guess taking this to a philosophical level, like, why are you doing this? Why even bother? You've been around for Bitcoin for a while. Like, I'm sure you're good. You could do whatever the hell you wanted with whoever you want. You said you're happy. It's what I brought up at the start, which is choosing to spend time with who you want to spend time with. Why go around and talk to nation states and do something that's of benefit to them, but not necessarily of benefit to you, at least short term, a lot of energy. It's pretty hard. There's a lot of travel, a lot of late nights, a lot of high pressure. Why?
Well, a number of reasons. One is that I believe it's good for the world to adopt Bitcoin sooner rather than later for the reasons we've discussed. But the other major point that a lot of people forget is that the transition into a Bitcoin standard is going to be very chaotic. If it's too rapid, it's sort of a demonetization event. The old currency starts to become useless and everyone is scrambling to get into Bitcoin. And that can entail a lot of human suffering. So back in 2016, I think there was a demonetization event in India where they remove, I think, $5 and $10 rupee notes out of circulation. And a lot of people died. Actually, I think maybe a dozen or so people died from exposure or being unable to pay for medical procedures because the hospital didn't want to take the old currency, right? So these things can be very chaotic. So imagine that type of event, but not just for a 5 and 10 rupee note, but for all the money of a country. And without knowledge of how Bitcoin works, you can see the opportunity for scammers. Like, okay, I don't know, the Japanese yen is worthless now. Give it to me, and I'll give you, Bcash. That could definitely happen, or worse, right?
Yeah.
So I think education is so important to make people understand how Bitcoin works, even at a very basic level. And this is also why we're building Aqua. We're trying to make a very accessible wallet that anybody can just use and experiment with, and get a little bit of Bitcoin. Because getting some Bitcoin is actually the best lesson. You can read all the books you want, but the experience of receiving your first dollar or your first couple satoshis is really, really eye opening that you have this and it's bearer asset. It's not custodial, and it's in your control. And if you lose the keys to that wallet, it's gone. I think that is a revelation that most people have the first time they receive Bitcoin, and then you get to the fear part where you're sending it, and I'm sending money over the internet to this string of letters and numbers. Is it going to work? Right. So, like getting people through these hurdles, I think, is the best way to educate them. But yeah, I see the transition could be very messy. And at the same time, when I'm talking about Omega, a lot of people think I'm just pumping the price and, introducing FOMO. But I really believe this is really going to happen because these transitions from one money to another are not very gradual. They are very rapid and they're unexpected usually. So I'm trying to make people understand that, expect the unexpected, plan accordingly. Suddenly is very sudden. But,
I saw
that's the
your
biggest
thread the
thing.
other day. Suddenly, then sudden as suddenly, and then suddenly, I don't know, it just kept going on and on and on.
Yeah. So, yeah, we want to prepare people, and working with governments is a good way to do that counterintuitively because people look towards their governments for guidance and wisdom. So, having a country like El Salvador say Bitcoin's legal tender, that changes a lot of things and people start to pay attention, I think.
Yeah.
So that's one part of it. The second part is doing this stuff is good for Bitcoiners because if you think about it, the current laws don't offer much protection if Bitcoin is money and money is information, right? There is really little protection of information. And there is also not a lot of understanding about basic IT security in the general population. People still use passwords like password 123, and even in the Bitcoin space slash crypto, there you've heard people store their seed in Evernote or Google Drive or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So security is a big thing, but the laws to protect people, I think, need to be massively transformed because you know Bitcoin is information, information is money. So you could have, um, you know, a border search. I think being from Australia, like the border officers have the right to seize your electronic devices and force you to open them, right?
Yeah. I get stopped
That is,
every time.
yeah, that's why I don't want to go to Australia. But there that has to change before Bitcoin can be safely used by the people. Otherwise, you have a border officer that says, show me your phone. They unlock it, they poke around, they look at your seed phrase. What's to stop them from memorizing those words or, capturing it on video? Or maybe they didn't capture it on video, but there is a system that captures video as they're looking at phones, and then someone else steals your money. But these things are not really dealt with right now. But I think they do need to be discussed and brought to light that the current laws don't really do anything to protect people in the age at which money is information. So privacy, respect for privacy, sovereignty, all these things need to be boosted up. And I think this comes with the work that we're doing to engage with governments to slowly get them to understand Bitcoin and then what the repercussions are after that, right? That they need to adapt for to live in this Bitcoin age.
So you're doing Satoshi's work. I absolutely love it. On the same thread, like if you could change one aspect of the Bitcoin protocol without having a hard fork, what would it be?
I would say adding confidential transactions. Um, that's probably the biggest thing that we were missing. So we talked earlier about the anonymity of Bitcoin, right? And that all Bitcoin is technically new Bitcoin. But unfortunately, you can have companies and people that say, "Well, I can trace back, and that Bitcoin came from this place." But that is just astrology. It's like maybe it did. But the way it's dealt with right now is that it's treated as if it were fact when it should be the other way, that you need some definitive proof that actually that is someone else's Bitcoin or your Bitcoin, that that it's yours. Otherwise, you can have a lot of false positives, and you could be flagged for whatever reason because I don't know, 6 hops away, maybe it was used to buy drugs, and then now you're flagged as being related to a cartel or something, right?
Yeah.
So if I could change anything, I would say put confidentiality in. And a friend of mine, Rossello, from Brazil, he had a very good point why privacy is so important. Like a lot of people using Tether, they're opening themselves up to being robbed if they're using Tron or Ethereum Tether because these are account based systems. Even like just using these crypto assets themselves, like Tron and Tether, it's account based, right? But they don't really use it for that. They're using Tether on Tron and Ethereum. But he was saying, you can send some money to your cousin, and then maybe your cousin has a friend that looks it up, and he knows that that came from you, Sean, and that you have 1 million Tether. Well, what if his friend is a criminal? Then he's gonna go and rob you, right? So there are direct things that are bad due to a lack of privacy that
Yeah.
can be fixed through using Lightning and Liquid. And privacy is very much needed because you can't always assume that everyone is law abiding. Some people will rob you. So you kind of need this degree of basic privacy. Does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, it answers in an amazing way. And I agree. Like, if I go to spend Bitcoin, I don't need someone looking at my address and seeing every other bloody transaction that I've done, and then where that's gone, and keeps going through the system. So I agree. I'd like that to happen. Like, is there anyone working on it currently? Because there's a conversation that was happening, 2, 3, 4 years ago. Like, it was really loud in the space, but I haven't heard much this year. It's sort of really been ETS, strategic Bitcoin reserve, number go up. But are people trying to implement this?
Not really. I think privacy is sort of an afterthought. A lot of people are obviously talking about covenants and letting everyone have a UTXO, but it doesn't seem to be a big factor in discussion right now. But fortunately, we do have Lightning, which helps a lot with privacy, assuming you're not using a centralized provider, because I think they can, even like if you're using Phoenix Wallet, they've said like, because they are the LSP, they can actually see everything you're doing. It's not that much better than a fully custodial Lightning wallet too. So if you're using a non-custodial wallet that has some privacy element, then it's pretty good. But even without that, Lightning is still better than transacting purely on main chain.
Yeah, I like that. So, like, with everything that we've discussed, I've got a few more questions. But imagine Bitcoin is like the global world reserve currency. We've had that event, the strategic Bitcoin reserves played out, nation states. They're all on their balance sheet. What are, like, maybe the top one or two things that you would fear in that situation?
Well, there's definitely a concern of centralization of Bitcoin. Um, Having too much Bitcoin in one country is not ideal. And this is why also we're trying to engage with more countries to educate them that they should also put together a Bitcoin stockpile. But sadly, a lot of people are looking towards the US to lead. So it's likely that they'll come after the US does their strategic reserve. Um, there's worry that there's too much mining in the US now. Previously, there was a lot of concern about mining in China because it was 70%. Less so now, but now the US is starting to ramp up. But I know a lot of the US miners are looking to diversify outside of the US too because they don't want to be beholden to another Biden type administration in the future. So that's also good that we're seeing some of that initiative. But yeah, really, it's just the concentration that's not ideal. But there's not really much you can do about it other than what we're doing to educate more countries that they need Bitcoin.
Yeah, I like that. And sorry again, you've probably been asked this question a lot, Samson. I do apologize. What's it like? Everyone that comes into Bitcoin spends a while in here. They're going to see you, and they're going to see that you're one of the best and brightest minds within Bitcoin.
Thank you.
You're also like very connected with everyone else that's in that category. You know, whether you want to call them A-list celebrities within Bitcoin, just people putting in the proof of work. People like Adam Back, Jeff Booth, like the list goes on, Mark Moss, etc., etc., etc. Like you're spending a lot of time, you're really close with them. What's that experience like, and how has that enriched your life? Like the connections, the people that you've met within Bitcoin.
Um, I think it's generally a very good experience. Having bright people that are on the same mission is a good feeling. I like to think of it as, we're all allies in the common cause of moving Bitcoin forward. So it's kind of like you have a team with you that everyone's focused on different areas and doing different things, but the goal is a common goal, which is to make Bitcoin a standard for the world and to fix a lot of the injustice and a lot of the manipulation that is endemic to the fiat system.
I like that. Um, with like, it doesn't really make sense. And you sort of started talking about this earlier, but BlackRock, Wall Street are buying so many Bitcoin, and then MicroStrategy is buying an insane amount of Bitcoin, and the price isn't really moving at the moment. But I guess like, what's the next catalyst to do it, or maybe even on a deeper level? Like, why do we go sideways for so long, and then we just jump up, and then we go sideways for so long?
I don't know. It just seems weird. Like I said
It's
before,
it's
the
strange.
the imbalance is just staggering, like 20 times more demand than supply. And there is a theory that it's OGs selling, but I really don't think that's the case. Like you don't hold your Bitcoin from $10 to $100,000 and then suddenly decide, yeah, I'm going to sell it all. Maybe you take some off, but I don't believe those statistics that say like OGs have sold a few $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. I think they're just moving to cold storage or upgrading or whatnot. So where does that come from? There's a couple theories. One is that there's sort of a pool of coins on exchanges somewhere in the 2 million mark. Um, and that is sort of sloshing around, facilitating market making, maybe arbitrage, and maybe trying to trade. And I think what's happening is some of that is being whittled down because they're trying to sell it, but they may not be able to buy back. So it's just a matter of that the new buyers taking it off of exchange. But I have a feeling that that's actually whittled down significantly, and we'll see the effects of that soon. The other theory I had for long sideways periods is simply that there is some entity out there or some exchange that is naked selling Bitcoin that they don't have. And, you
Scary.
know, uh, there is precedent for that, which is FTX.
Yeah.
They sold Bitcoin they didn't have, to be put. And theoretically, if you just sold Bitcoin you don't have, then the price should keep on decreasing. But at the same time, you might notice that Bitcoin dominance is increasing, right? So my theory is that there are some entities out there naked selling altcoins. And people that buy altcoins, they typically leave them on exchanges. So there can't really be a run on the bank. There's no such thing as proof of keys for altcoins, right? They're either staking it or they're leaving it there um, for group staking, or like staking through staking services, or just for trading. But you don't really take altcoins into your own wallet. It's just not a thing, right? So if this entity exists that is naked selling Bitcoin, needs to top up, what they can do is naked sell some altcoins to rebalance their Bitcoin holdings, because I would imagine that it's some sort of operating entity, and they need to meet Bitcoin withdrawals sometime. So what they can do is naked sell altcoins, buy back a little bit of Bitcoin, and that should give you the sideways action, right? It goes down a bit and it comes back up, and it kind of hovers around. But I don't think this is a long-term sustainable thing. if this is happening. But that's my theory.
Yeah. And like, I guess on that point, what's your thoughts about leaving your Bitcoin on the exchange?
I mean, you probably shouldn't, but a lot of people do, and it's not ideal. I think you need to have your own Bitcoin and keep it in cold storage.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Samson, is there anything that I haven't asked that you'd like to share with the audience, or that's top of mind at the minute?
Yeah, so I wanted to just maybe extend a bit on that last point about Bitcoin in cold storage. Um, some people think they just need to buy a hardware wallet and that's good enough. But you're not putting yourself in a very good security situation if you also keep your hardware wallet with you at home with your seed phrase stamped into metal at home too. I would say the best definition of cold storage is that you cannot access your coins readily in a week.
Yeah.
Right? You should have some procedure in place, geographical dispersal or something to make sure that you cannot access it. And as Bitcoin becomes more valuable, as it goes up, there are going to be people targeting you. And this is also why privacy is important too. But there are things that people presume to be okay, and that is just, I got a hardware wallet. It's not on the exchange. But you have to also factor in adversarial thinking that, you will get singled out and potentially targeted. So you don't want to be able to access it. You should have it in a setup in which it'll take you a decent amount of time or have to jump through some hoops to get to your cold storage. And I think that is the best definition of cold storage. It's not that it's offline, but you can't tap into it immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I call that deep cold storage. There's cold storage and there's deep cold storage, and that's exactly where it should be, and definitely not at home. I've got a channel partner, the Bitcoin Way, who help people do that. For everyone watching, the first 30 minutes is free. They can give you the education to be able to do that. They'll teach you. They'll never touch your keys or your coins. It's just information. And I guess that's the hardest thing. And this sort of goes back to what you were saying earlier, Samson, is people don't have the time to understand money, or they don't want to understand money. But unfortunately, if they're not willing to put in a little bit of time to do it, I feel like they are going to get left behind as Bitcoin becomes this dominant global monetary system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's not much we can do about it. But the only bright side, I think, is really the ETFs. And a lot of diehard Bitcoiners think, oh, that's horrible. But for an average person, that is a step up for them that they have Bitcoin exposure, or even MicroStrategy for that matter, right? Yes, it's it's a stock, it's an equity, but at least they have exposure to Bitcoin, and I think that is what matters. And they don't have to deal with the complexity. They don't have to deal with seed phrases and hardware wallets and cold storage. And I don't think we should expect that everyone's going to do things the exact right way that we like to do it, but they should definitely store some value in Bitcoin in whichever vehicle is comfortable for them at that time.
I absolutely love that. And I'm sort of changing my own mind, not for what I'd personally do. It's Bitcoin and deep cold storage, but I can see the value for entities and stuff. And definitely at the beginning, like whatever way they can just get into it. And then for the people that have the time and the capacity, I think they should go down. And that's really the power of Bitcoin, is it allows you to become sovereign when it's in deep cold storage. But Samson, what a pleasure. Just again, truly, thank you so much for all the entertainment, like the memes on X, the mega candle, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I 100% agree. I believe you. It is coming. Does it happen this cycle? Does this cycle even exist? Are we in a super cycle? People could say we've been in a super cycle for the last 15, 16 years, really, when you zoom out of it. So either way, like, just keep up the amazing work. I'm so glad you're on Team Bitcoin. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Sean. You too. It's all towards the same cause, and podcasts are a way that we educate everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And for everyone, if you're not following Samson, you're missing out. You've been missing out for a very long time. I've linked all his details below, both Jan3 and his X account. Is there anywhere else people can find you, Samson?
Yeah, I think that's mostly it. I have an Instagram, but I don't post much there.
Yeah. No, awesome. We can put that in if you want me to share it as well. But thank you, everyone. Please do something nice for yourself today, for somebody else out there. Have a beautiful day. Be blessed. Peace.